So surrogacy with a family member, why not? What about a friend? By all means, go for it. Now, there's some things you want to know about going that route, but I bet you're wondering, will it cost less? Well, let's talk about that. What's up? My name is Corlandos Scott, and I'm an assisted reproductive technologies attorney, which basically means I've dedicated my practice to helping people grow their family through assisted reproduction, methods like surrogacy. So we're going to talk about working with a family member for your surrogacy journey in this episode. We'll look at the costs and we'll look at the costs. Let's jump right in. All right, so most surrogacy journeys with a family member or a friend is called an altruistic surrogacy. Now, this is where the surrogate mother is driven by kind gestures and goodwill. And what we refer to most times is a surrogacy journey without compensation. Because really, I think that all surrogacy journeys are altruistic, whether she's being compensated or not. But when you hear that phrase thrown around with regards to surrogacy as it's commonly referred to, an altruistic journey simply means that the surrogate is not being paid a base compensation or a compensation package for being the surrogate. This means the only thing she gets from this process is the sheer happiness for the opportunity to help you. Now, in an altruistic surrogacy, like I said, surrogate mothers don't receive compensation, and it's almost always the same when the surrogate mother is a family member. Now, it's not always, but I say almost always. It really depends on your agreement with your family member or your friend. You're free to provide a compensation to whoever you want. But having a family member as a surrogate, it doesn't limit your options or it doesn't veer from the normal surrogacy standard agreement, even though that person is a friend or a family member. It would be the same as if they were a stranger. So keep that in mind. There are some things that we're going to have to address, whether it's your sister or whether it's a total stranger from an agency. Now, when we talk about cost, yes, having a family member or your friend become a surrogate for you, it not only gives you some peace of mind in the sense that you think or you have a good estimation that you know this person, but yes, it can save you a hefty price tag. It could be anywhere between $30,000 up to $100,000, give or take. Now, just because you're having a family member or your friend serve as your surrogate, the burden and the responsibilities that come with the process may change also. Why do I say that? Because most times when you're having a family member do your bidding as a surrogate, so to speak, you're not going to be working with an agency who would have typically matched you with someone. And when you're not working with an agency, it doesn't do away with all of the tasks that an agency would have normally done. It just means that you're now going to have to do those things. Now, here are some of the things that you may be able to do away with. You may be able to do away with a few steps in the process, like matching, and some of the screening or the pre-screening requirements, but there's still a lot to be considered. For instance, there's no way around getting around the costs and the expenses involved in the medical procedures and the expenses related to the pregnancy. But let's look at some of the other costs. There are some other costs that you may possibly be saving on, like I said, and here they are. If you're working with an agency to manage and to coordinate everything between you and the surrogate and the clinic and the schedules and the procedures and the legal processes, oh my, then you may be able to save because you're not going to have an agency handling all those processes for you. But remember, the processes still need to be handled. Another option is you can maybe arrange a hybrid type relationship where at least you're working with a surrogacy consultant. Now, this would still save you hundreds and maybe even thousands of dollars while still getting most of the crucial support from someone who knows their way around third-party reproduction. That way, you may have saved because it didn't cost you to match or be matched with the person, but you're still getting help navigating some of those ins and outs and the minutia of the everyday process involved with surrogacy. Now, even though you're working with your sister or your cousin or maybe your best friend from work as your surrogate, you still aren't getting around some of the medical procedures. Think about this. You should have that person screened. I call this a mandatory screening. And most reputable fertility doctors are going to make sure that she's screened before they agree to proceed with the medical processes. So make sure you get that medical screening and assessment and all the tests associated with determining if she is healthy enough to serve as a surrogate. There's also the psychological screening that you have to think about. You got to make sure that she's psychologically screened and she's mentally prepared and capable to serve and work with you as your surrogate. There's also, if you're working with a traditional surrogate where her eggs will be used in creating the embryos that will become your child, you want to think about screening around genetic evaluations. You want to test and screen for any kind of genetic disorders or conditions, or even any recessive genes that the father or sperm donor may also have in their lineage that you don't want to combine and create the possibility of some genetic abnormalities in the resulting embryo and child. There's also the issue of legal fees. That's legal fees for both you and for the surrogate. For instance, in California, the law is that both parties to a surrogacy arrangement, that's the parents and the surrogate, must be represented by their own individual separate counsel. So that's a cost that whether you're working with a friend and family member or you're working with someone that you connected with through the agency as a total stranger, that's still a cost that you have to plan for. Now, I have other videos on the legal process for surrogacy, but just to give you a quick primer, in the legal process, you're going to have two main components. You're going to have a contract between yourself and the surrogate, and you're also going to have an attorney prepare the parentage order that a judge or court of law will need to sign to finalize your parental rights and make sure that it's clear to the hospital, the state, and everyone else that you are the legal parent of the child and that your name should go on that birth certificate. There's also still some other things that need to be considered even if you're working with a family member, and that's insurance for the surrogate. Now, insurance ranges from state to state and from plan to plan. I would plan for at least $5,000 minimum as a cost that you would need in order to make sure the surrogate is covered throughout the pregnancy. And you may be wondering, why do I need to pay for her health insurance? Well, it's really a benefit to you because as the parent, you're responsible for taking on all of the financial burden of the process because the surrogate is taking on all the physical burden of the process. So you see, it's an exchange. You're handling the finances, she's handling the physical. Finances, physical. And her being covered by insurance will lessen the amount of money that you have to come out of pocket to cover things that come up during the pregnancy, like normal day-to-day health coverage and medical coverage, as well as any complications that could arise. The insurance policy gives her peace of mind, and it also gives you peace of mind and some financial support there. Now, one of the optional things that we typically see in surrogacies that are not altruistic is allowance for a number of certain other things. One of those things, and you can determine whether you want to include this in your arrangement with your friend or family member or not, but one of them is maternity clothing. This could be optional depending on the surrogate, but typically we see around $500 to $1,000 or more for a singleton pregnancy, and maybe a little bit more than that if the surrogate is carrying multiples. And the reason for this is natural. I mean, as she grows and as the baby grows inside her, she's bound to grow out of her clothes. And so what you're doing is just simply giving her an allotment of money to help her find clothing that will fit her throughout the course of the pregnancy and recognize that, she'll have to make some adjustments. So you're taking on, again, the financial burden of her making those adjustments because she's taking on the physical burden. There's also expenses around transportation and other incidental things like that. Now, this will depend on how far or how near the surrogate lives to the clinic or her doctors or the birth hospital, but typically what we see is that surrogates are compensated something if they need to travel long distances. So for instance, if your surrogate or your friend or family member who's serving as your surrogate needs to travel over 50 miles, for a doctor's appointment or anything like that, that you would compensate her or reimburse her for the mileage that she's putting on her car or make sure that she has transportation to and from those things. Again, these aren't things that absolutely have to happen, but they're things to keep in mind that are outside the normal compensation, but they're really reimbursements to make the surrogate whole. Because after all, she's carrying your baby and she's driving around and running mileage up on her car. You want to make sure that you can compensate her, at least to reimburse her for what she's putting out in order to serve and help as your surrogate. There's also the expense of lost wages. There may come a point in this pregnancy where the doctor places her on bed rest, or restricted activity because of the pregnancy, or maybe any complications, or maybe just because what the doctor is seeing leads her to believe that the surrogate needs to get off her feet for a little while. Well, often when that happens, the surrogate cannot work. And if she cannot work, she may not be able to earn wages. And since the only reason she's not working is because she's carrying your baby and that has put her on bed rest, oftentimes parents will compensate or reimburse her what she would have been able to make it work, just so that she doesn't miss any normal pay activity. So this is something else to keep in mind with regards to working with your family member or your friend as your surrogate, as it surrounds cost. Now that you know a few of the things that are involved in determining what types of compensation a surrogate will get or will not get, let's talk about some do's and don'ts and some other issues surrounding working with your family member or friend. But before we do, I want you to do something for me. If you're liking this video, if you're getting anything out of it, let YouTube know. How do you do that? Just click that like button. You know, the little thumbs up button? Click it. And while you're at it, just go crazy and click that little bell beside the subscribe button. That bell lets you know whenever I release a new video, so you won't miss it. I mean, come on, who likes FOMO? Nobody wants to miss out. Go ahead, click it. So now we know that working with a family member or a friend can definitely save you money when it comes to your surrogacy journey. And that savings is great, but that's not the end of the story. There's some other things we need to talk about. So let's talk about some do's and don'ts. Do consider that more often than not, the surrogate or the family member that you're working with may not feel comfortable asking for or even accepting money from you as the intended parent, other than maybe reimbursements related to the expenses, like I said. So for instance, mileage reimbursements and things like that. And this allows the intended parent to just pay what they want and only handle the absolutely necessaries, like the medical procedures. But don't just assume everything is okay, or you should be free not to even bring up the subject because the surrogate is a family member or a friend. My suggestion is you take the initiative to discuss the financial aspect. I know it's awkward at the beginning, but this will, I know undoubtedly, avoid awkward situations arising in the future around any talks involving finances. And as much as you can, I encourage you not to skimp on the benefits package. You're already going to be saving a lot by having your family member or a friend become your surrogate. So as much as you're able to, make sure that you reciprocate that altruism, so to speak, by making sure she knows that you're there for her on the financial part of things. Because remember, you're handling the finances, she's handling the physical. Now, I know you have a good idea of how to proceed and what things need to happen, but I encourage you to really dig in and do your research, and I even suggest that you seek the help of a surrogacy consultant or some other surrogacy professional, because there are a lot of things that only a surrogate expert could know that will make the surrogacy journey more meaningful and less worrisome for you and your friend or family member who's going to be your surrogate. And in the process, save you more money. The worst money spent is money spent cleaning up mistakes that could have been avoided in the first place. So for example, which insurance is surrogacy friendly? This is going to save you a lot of money later on if you start the process and think, oh, she has insurance, but come to find out her policy is one that forbids her from being a surrogate. You want to know that up front, right? That could save you some money. You want to find a mental health professional for you and your surrogate. You want to find a clinic. You want to find a birth hospital that's surrogacy friendly. You want to have attorneys in place who will be with you the entire journey from the time you consider doing this until you're leaving the hospital. One like somebody I know. But you want to find somebody that you can work with who can help you. All the things that feel like trying to find a needle and a mountain of needles and a mountain of needles and a haystack full of needles. This is why you have to have a good team around you. I encourage you, don't try to do it on your own entirely, thinking you can get all the information you need from Google. Google's a good place to start, but you want to get some professionals involved. So you know that you can save money by working with a family member or working with a friend to be your surrogate. You can maybe get around the need for an agency, and you can even save money on other things. But at the end of the day, you will still need a contract between you and your surrogate. No matter who she is, whether she's your sister or best friend, the law requires it. So make sure that you find out exactly what needs to happen in the surrogacy process. And lucky for you, I have a primer that does just that for you. I call it my surrogacy plan, and you can get it by clicking the link below. It's my comprehensive surrogacy plan that walks you through the process. I even give you some case studies from former clients of mine that shows you what they did right and what they did wrong, and hopefully you'll be able to use that to get ahead and avoid the mistakes that they had to encounter on their surrogacy journey. So just click the link below. It's absolutely free. So go ahead and take advantage of that. Click the link below and I'll see you there.